stay with us. This is Top of the Morning. I'm Steve Izan. We're here today at the Maryland Women's Heritage Center. We have a very special program for you. You're not going to want to miss it. The highlight of today's visit is going to be that with Secretary Ken Salazar, Secretary of the Interior for the United States. He's here to speak about the heritage of women and the important role that they play in our developing society. Heritage Center. We're here this morning with Sally Grant. Sally, you have a long and distinguished association with this. Tell us, the audience, please, a little bit about your background and how you came to be part of this.
Okay, I do have a long association. Back in 1982, I became chair of the Maryland Commission for Women, and Jill Moss Greenberg, who was also on the chair. And at that time, a year or two later, we established the Maryland Women's Hall of Fame, which we thought was extremely important to remember women's history, to be all-inclusive, not just racially, but geographically, religiously, also in occupations. And Jill's idea then was to have a real heritage center, a real home, and a place they can celebrate women from all over the state, of all ages, especially our young women, again, be all-inclusive. And so Jill is a follower of mine, I'm a follower of Jill's, and so I'm a founding member of this Heritage Center, and I just think it's a wonderful place.
Before we go to break, do you have any last words that you'd like to leave with our audience?
Well, I think that we need more days like this. We need more time to look at and celebrate and work on women's history.
Sally, thank you very much. We'll be right back. Please stay with us. We're back. I'm with Anna Chavez, the CEO of the Girl Scouts. It's just such an honor to have you here. You didn't bring any cookies with you, did you?
I did not.
Okay, well, and we're really talking about something much more important than cookies, although that is an important part. But please, your association here for today with the event.
Let me tell you a little bit first about Girl Scouts. I am the CEO for Girl Scouts of the USA, which is a national organization where we build girls of courage, confidence, and character who make the world a better place. So we have approximately 3 million members here in the United States and in over 90 countries abroad. We were just actually celebrating our 100th anniversary, and so that's why I'm here today, to celebrate the history of this country and the history of women making wonderful things happen in the local communities.
Well, I think everyone probably wants to thank you and the organization for doing that. I know that for decades you've been a force for good for development of young women. What's the significance of the Secretary of Interior, Secretary Salazar, being here today?
Well, first of all, I knew him in his prior position as Attorney General of Colorado, and so have been very impressed by his leadership in this country. I think it's significant that he's here today to talk about women's history and to celebrate the successes in this country.
Thank you so much for coming on the program. We'll be right back. Please stay with us.
How are you? Fine. We're going to start our program. I'm sorry we're late, but we were collecting lots of great ideas upstairs. So thank you all for being here.
We want to thank Secretary Salazar for actually initiating, having the first ever meeting from the Department of the Interior to actually look at the invisibility of women's history and how we correct that. We are happy that he can be in our site. We hope this space is a model, and most of Can you hear me better? Yes. Sorry about that. And most of you know our concern here is an integrated approach to women's history. We started working in 1980 and opened these temporary doors. We are thrilled to have Secretary Salazar in the department looking at a national perspective. We know he has great notes from the meeting. And I understand he also has 2 daughters and a granddaughter. Is that correct? So he has special vested interest for the future. And we are proud in Maryland, being the first in many ways, but having a wonderful mayor of the city of Baltimore, the first lady who was very clear about not just being identified as First Lady, but being Judge O'Malley and all the a person who needs no introduction, but who will introduce the Secretary, our Mayor of Baltimore City, Stephanie Rawlings-Blake.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Jill, thank you so much for the kind introduction and for hosting us this afternoon. I have to say, and thank Secretary Salazar, it was a thought-provoking conversation that we had, and I can tell from his passion and his commitment not just to hear what we had to say, because I know a lot of people here, but one thing I was impressed about our secretary is that he then made sure that he heard what we were saying, that we were all leaving with the same understanding of where we were headed next, and I really appreciated that about you, Secretary. It's an honor to also be here with, even though she doesn't like the title, our First Lady of Maryland, Judge Katie O'Malley. It's always good to be with her as we strive to protect Maryland's women's history and to make sure that we strive to integrate it into all of the history that is told about Maryland. I'm also pleased to be here with Councilwoman Helen Holton, who is especially passionate about women's history as well. It wasn't that long ago that we just celebrated another milestone in Maryland women's history, and that is our Senator Barbara Mikulski, who is now the longest serving woman in We both served on the city council, not at the same time, of course, but that is where we got our start. And she always talks about being on the city council and being regularly called little girl by the mayor and members of the council who were clearly not ready to share their space with a female. And she endured as well as the other women on the council and paved the way for Helen and myself. When I joined the council, I was the youngest member elected, and by that time there had been enough leaders, political and public servant leaders that were women, that it was my age that was remarkable, and not the fact that I was a woman. So I have Senator Mikulski and so many other women to thank for that. But we still see times where women are excluded. I mean, it was just last month when the Congress held a hearing on female contraception, and not one woman was on the panel. And the funny thing about it is, if somebody wouldn't have mentioned it to them, I don't think they would have even noticed it. And that is what we are fighting against today. So, I think it is so important to tell these stories. It remains important that we have these discussions for us now and for women and Americans to come. And for that reason, I want to thank the Secretary for being here, be it the history and the contributions of African Americans, American Latinos, or Americans' women heritage. You have made telling the story of all of America's people important. And for that, I thank you. And I would like to now bring to the podium our Secretary of the Interior, Secretary Salazar.
Thank you very much. You're fortunate to have a great mayor and Stephanie here in Baltimore. Give her another round of applause. Raj, let me just say, I don't like that term First Lady either, because she's a judge in her own right, a power in her own right, and I've known her family for a long time because they have been great supporters of me even when I was running for the U.S. Senate. So thank you so much, Katie, for being here today and for being a part of this conversation. Give her a round of applause. To our host, Jill, and so much of her passion, which is embodied here in this center. Thank you for hosting us. Let's give her a round of applause. A lot of people here, but let me just introduce just a few people. Rachel Jacobson, my Assistant Secretary for Fish, Wildlife, and Parks. One of the great women that works with me in the Department of Interior and oversees about 33,000 people now in the National Park Service and the Fish and Wildlife Service. And to her left is Stephanie Toothman. Stephanie is the head of our Cultural Resources Program in the National Park Service. And then Peggy Odell, the Deputy Director of National Parks, is somewhere around here. She's probably figuring out our plans for our next steps. And just quickly, a couple of other people who've been so helpful to me in organizing this event. Nanakwa Embo, where are you? Here. You're back here. Nanakwa, raise your hand. You're one of those young women. She's 24 years old. She's going to be President of the United States one of these days. And then Christina, come over here. Show you Christina and Jonathan, come up here. These are all my friends. And then Melissa Schwartz, who worked with Senator Murkowski, and in fact, she was one of the find this place. Thank you. And Tammy Heilman from the Department of Interior. Let me just quickly say a few things. First, the President has been very clear to me since I took this job as Secretary of Interior that as a member of his cabinet, one of the things that I should do in the National Park Service is to make sure that we were telling the story of all of America. He is a strong believer in an inclusive America, that no matter who you are, no matter where you're from, no matter what your history is, it's important that that history be told. And yet as I came into the Department of Interior, it became clear to me that there was still a tremendous amount of work for us to be doing with respect to the heritage of all Americans, so that at the end of the day, we're telling everybody's story, because no one story is more important than another's. No one story is superior to that of anybody else. But the fact of the matter is, when you look at the first several centuries of our country, we have not done a very good job at telling the story of all of America. And so it has been with great pride as Secretary of Interior that I've taken that part of our mission, being the custodian of America's history, to a sense of great importance within our department. And it has led to a number of different things. In African American history, which is a history which was long neglected in this country, today I can say proudly that under this president we have now moved forward with the creation of the 396th National Park in Southern Virginia, Fort Monroe, which marks the beginning and the end of slavery, the place where the first African American was born, the place that became the crucible for Abraham Lincoln's sinking on the Emancipation Proclamation. We moved forward with the Martin Luther King National Memorial on the National Mall, right between the Lincoln Memorial and the Jefferson Memorial. And just a few weeks ago, we broke ground on the African American Museum at the Smithsonian on the National Mall, and construction is underway. And so what we have done there, we need to do in other places of our country as well. Japanese Americans, for example, have contributed greatly to our history. Senator Danny Inouye, who is, from my point of view, one of our true living heroes of America, the winner of the Medal of Honor in World War II, now was 84 years old. A great friend of mine. When you see him on the Senate floor, he doesn't have an arm. And that was because that arm was blown off in his heroic efforts fighting for the defense of freedom and the defense of this country in World War II. And yet he, as a Japanese American, was told that he could not fight on behalf of his country. So as he tells a story, and he would make you all come to tears if you were listening to his story, he tells his effort at getting people to sign the petitions in Hawaii to allow them to form a Japanese American military battalion. And he said the proudest day of his life was when he received a letter from President Roosevelt, which told him that a proclamation had been signed that they could go ahead and form a military battalion. That battalion became the most decorated in history the most decorated group of military personnel in the history of the United States of America. And so today, when we celebrate the Japanese-American internment camps, which are going on in this country, it's also a reminder to us that there were other chapters of that history. And so just last week, we put in a significant amount of money to celebrate 12 of these internment camps, so that we can remember that also painful chapter of America's history. And so today, for Women's History Month, it seemed to me that more than us just having some kind of a celebration within the Department of the Interior in Washington, D.C., that what we ought to do is that we ought to have a dialogue about how we ought to make sure that we tell the story of the contributions of women across America in a much more thorough and a much more thoughtful way. And so that's what we are here to kick off today, and that's what we were having a meeting about, to talk about some next steps on how we can do some of the great things that you have done here in Maryland and take them across the country, how we can develop the information that is needed to really be able to tell the story of American women as part of the tapestry of American history. Because we all know, no matter who we are, no matter what our backgrounds are, that the only reason that we are here, frankly, is because it is women who have made it all possible. And we will see the day. We will see the day when we do have women president of the United States, a woman. And I think it's not. There's a lot of other barriers that we have to overcome. I was thinking about Senator Murkowski when she was celebrated, rightfully so, as being the longest-serving woman in the United States Congress. That I believe in the U.S. Senate now, where I served, we only have, I think, 12 members of the U.S. Senate who are women. And so yet you think about this body that shapes our national policy has so much of an impact on all the 307 million Americans and people throughout our world, throughout our planet. And that underrepresentation will, over time, be overcome. And we will have a better sense of balance in that great deliberative body in Washington, D.C. So I would like to get some ideas from you. I've heard from a lot of the people who I met with earlier about some of their ideas about how we move forward. But here's a couple of things just to start you out with. Peggy Odell, Rachel Jacobson, and others have recommended that what we do is we move forward with a national collaborative on the National Historic Landmarks effort. It's really patterned after what happened here in the Northeast region, but to make it go across the nation. Now, let me tell you what that means. What it basically means is that the National Historic Landmarks that we give are the highest designation that is given to any particular place in the United States of America. It's an authority which I have as the Secretary of Interior today. And yet, when you look at the history of the United States and our historic landmarks, only about 4% of those historic landmarks reflect the important contribution of women across the United States of America, only about 4%. And so what we are committing to do today is to move forward with what will be an initial chapter of expanding this collaborative to take it all the way across the nation so that we can identify those landmarks that deserve recognition by the United States of America as those historic landmarks that reflect the contribution of women. The second thing that we will do is to build on that, and hopefully under Rachel and Peggy's and Stephanie's leadership, what we will do is to put together a theme study of a kind that will allow us to tell that story of the contribution of women across the country. There are other ideas that we want to pursue, and we'll be hopefully inviting you to come to something in the not-too-distant future as well. But at the end of the day, our efforts here are really to make sure that women feel that their history is being recognized, because it is important for our history and for our heritage, but also it's about our future. It's about our daughters and our granddaughters and those who have not yet been born, who someday will be able to born into a world where there won't be the kinds of ceilings and the kinds of barriers that they have felt in history. It should not matter that you are born in this world as man or woman in terms of the opportunities that you ultimately have. But so much of that, in my view, is dependent also on us being able to reflect the history and contributions that have been made. And frankly, for too long, the history of women, the history of African Americans, Japanese Americans, and others really has not been given the kind of importance that it should have been given. Much of that history has either been swept under the rug or simply has not been recognized. I was having a conversation in our earlier meeting with one of my friends from the Smithsonian Institute, and we need to do more in the Smithsonian to make sure that it's being relevant to the United States of America. Our director of the National Park Service, when President Obama and I appointed him to be the director of the National Park Service, said that his highest priority, and I have his letter at my desk that I keep pulling out every once in a while as we have conversations about his promises, but it's about making the National Park Service relevant to the 21st century. Well, the way we make the National Park Service relevant to the people of this country in the 21st century is to make sure that the National Park Service, as it tells the story of America, is telling the story of all of America. Yes. And so that's what I am committed to doing here as we celebrate in Baltimore, Maryland, the Women's History Month, but also looking ahead so that it's not just a month of celebration, but hopefully we'll be able to put this into an action plan that will truly celebrate the contributions of women and also be an educational instrument in our schools and in our society that can inspire the next generation of women and all of their leaders. So with that, let me just open it up to any questions or comments that any of you may have. So the women's, I'm going to call on you first, and Senator, I'm going to call on you.
Well, I wanted to start it off with considering that women's accomplishments have been given little note, especially in our U.S. history books. Usually it's a side note, or it mentions who she married. Thus, many women's historic sites, especially the small ones, are struggling in need of recognition, relevance, and in financial support. What is the Department of Interior's aim in bringing more notice of these historic sites? And what support can women's sites with historic centers expect?
Yes, Sally, it's a very good question. You're exactly right. We are here because we care, and we, first of all, have to recognize that there's a great deficit in how we have told the story of women and their heritage. And so our job is to figure out a way of fixing it. Now, I don't pretend to have all the power and all the money that is needed to be able to do this in the next year or even in the next 2 years. But I hope,
I'm thinking next 20 years.
Yes, Sally. Well, I'm hoping that what we can do is to put together a blueprint of action that will essentially have the National Park Service, as it moves forward towards the celebration of its centennial, which is coming up in 2016. That's 5 years away. So that then the director of the National Park Service tells the story of America through its mission of being the custodian of our history, that we can say that women have not been left behind. And so that is what we hope we are able to do, is to move forward with that kind of
well, what about the many small sites? Maryland has lots of small sites throughout the state that tell the story of women's history. One of the things the Maryland Women's Heritage Center has been able to do, along with in partnership with the Maryland Commission for Women and the Maryland State Department of Education, is identify those sites. And so our thoughts are, what can these small sites that tell the story of women that a lot of people don't know about, but did enormous things for the state of Maryland and for the country.
Sully, it's I agree with you 100%. The fact of the matter is that there is a huge role here for the state historic preservation programs. We fund those in part, not enough, because we have to fight for the funding. Last year, the House Republicans, to be frank, voted to zero out historic preservation. We fought back, and we were able to send out to the states, I believe it was $65 million in historic preservation grants. But as that money goes out to the states, part of the conversation that we were having earlier today is we need to make sure that the state historic preservation officers are also being mindful of the ethic that we bring here today and that we're discussing here in this meeting, because there are lots of states. And I would hope that there are other states that could follow the example of Maryland. Maryland has done but still, as Jill was telling me, we're not complete here yet, okay? I mean, we still have a lot more work to do. But frankly, Maryland is far ahead of other states. But there's a definite role for the states, a definite role for the National Register of Historic Sites, which is not the national landmark designation. But that is there's tens of thousands of those sites that we currently have. And they generally come up through the state programs, nominated then to the National Park Service for designation. So we're working at it. Senator.
Briefly, Mr. Secretary, welcome. It's a pleasure having you, and I apologize with my back to some of you. But we're on kind of hallowed ground. I'm the grandson of Lily Mae Carroll Jackson, who picketed this very building to employ African American women and men in this utility. And more importantly, as I look at our mayor and as Judge O'Malley, it was Delegate Howard Pete Rawlings, who at a young age met Lily Carroll Jackson at the NAACP office on Dolphin Street and said, young man, you have aptitude in math and you can be somebody. Well, he went on to champion this museum being established at her home. Lily Mae Carroll Jackson is, as she said, we've been integrated a long time. She was a direct descendant of Charles Carroll Carrollton. And on the other side, Bowen, who came from really Interia and Somalia through England. The point is that she says America is God's molding area. And you met the Careys, Tony and Eleanor, and it was their grandmother, Margaret Carey, who banded together with Lily Jackson in the 30s, before it was popular, to join with May Gilman, G-I-L-M-A-N, whose father was the first president of Hopkins, Johns Hopkins, to testify against the lynching of an African American on the Eastern Shore, George Armwood. And that was before the Costigan-Wagner anti-lynching law. And these were women who then brought together a whole segment of the community. I think the Lily Carroll Jackson Museum building, because the judge will tell you her husband campaigned in that area, and it was through his effort as well in making sure that this building is of some significance to young women. My grandmother and my mother had 4 boys, but to make sure we were in tune to the needs of women, our pediatrician was an OBGYN, who was Dr. Louise Young, who was the first African-American woman to practice in medicine in the state of Maryland. And the idea was taking young men at that early age to say that, yes, women are doctors, and you're in good shape and you can do things. The application for Lily Carroll Jackson's home was put in 2001. Now, we've heard of all deliberate speed. And we have had repeated correspondence. Where's Mr. Tanabe from Morgan State University is here, who's championed it. And the new president of Morgan State University. And the governor has repeated, I even found one of the governor's letters, he sent as a councilman, then as mayor, and then as governor to try to help the museum.
Let me ask this question, Senator. So again, I heard just a little bit about it before I came into this meeting, but so what is the exact request?
Is that if you could have someone detail that this is a building that was purchased by an African-American woman. So that on Utah Place.
I know the history,
so
but what's the action that is requested?
The action is so that it could be designated as a historic site.
We're on the case. It is inexcusable that something like that would sit somewhere without a response since 2001. So I promise you that we'll be back to you.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna have Rachel, who's going to come, the Assistant Secretary for Fish, Wildlife, and Parks. I want you to take the senator's phone number. I want you to dig into it, and I want you to call it. Now, let me tell you about this young woman over here, the lawyer, Rachel Jacobson. She's the one who just led the whole effort to get $1 billion from BP to restore the Gulf of Mexico, and she has that kind of talent. So, I'm sure that she'll be able to figure figure out something that we can be responsive on, and we'll get back to you very quickly, Senator.
And my second recommendation is someone like this group help sensitize the Department of Interior that women are involved and that we won't have the small numbers that we have of sites being made, and to broaden your group.
And Senator, that's exactly the reason why we are here, and that's exactly what's going to happen. Now let me ask you this. It is now 4 o'clock, and I know we're supposed to like end at 4 o'clock, and I don't know what the mayor's schedule is or the judge's schedule. But here's the deal. When I come to do these town halls, I'd like to give everybody a chance who has a comment to give that comment to me. And I have one closing comment that I'm going to give, and then Rachel's going to close it off. So I have some cards that you can fill out if you want to give me a comment on your ideas on how we achieve the vision that the Senator and Jill and the mayor and the judge have been speaking about. So you can write down your thoughts. In addition to that, I want to know who wants to actually speak here this morning. So if you will raise your hand so we can try to divide up some time here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Okay, so you have about 13 people. So if you raise your hand, stand up. Okay, and stay standing. And then give me your names, because we're going to call on you and have a divided time. So let's start over here.
Megan Springy?
What is it?
Megan Springy?
Megan. Okay. Elizabeth. Okay. I promise we'll do this with all deliberate speed. Donna?
Diona.
Diona.
Ricks.
Okay, Diona. Okay.
Brianna
You can sit down once I've taken your name.
Brianna Simpkins.
Brianna? Okay, Brianna. Okay, next.
Nancy Shamu.
Hi, Nancy. How are you?
Fine.
Okay, so Nancy. Anybody here? Okay, still standing. Yes.
Shirley Supik.
Shirley. The Director Mayor, she had to leave, huh? So in her, I'll sense to give her a round of applause because she did have to leave. Thank you, Shirley. Let's go on.
Claire.
Claire? Claire. Okay, Claire. Okay. Audra? Audra. Okay. Audra. Okay, Audra. Al. Mel. Al Matt. Al. Okay, anybody else over here? Yes, ma'am.
Hard to tell you.
Yes, sir. I got a plan for you. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. There's 10 people, and I'm not going to interrupt much other than to kind of just say keep it short, because let's try to do this in 10 minutes. So you have up to 1 minute. So let me start with Megan.
Sure. First of all, I'm a graduate student, I'm an archaeologist at the University of Maryland, and I want to thank you for coming personally to have this discussion with us. I had the privilege of doing some archaeology at women's rights, and the superintendent is actually here. I have two comments, and the first is that when you think about women's history, that you interpret not just the elite women's history, but that you interpret all women's history, and so the workers and the laborers, the people whose stories usually don't get told. And also I was wondering, because the National Park Service is not the only agency that has cultural resources, is if you have any plans, for example, the properties with Fish and Wildlife or Bureau of Land Management, to interpret those as far as women's history goes as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Megan. Elizabeth?
I just wanted to make a suggestion of a way to get the information out to the population, and that is at the National Library of Medicine. We've developed a very easy and inexpensive way of taking exhibitions and making them around to, for example, we had an exhibition it was called Changing the Face of Medicine, celebrating America's women physicians. And we mailed that to 80 libraries around the country. Very inexpensive and very popular. So you could take something like this behind you and put it into this format for clearly.
Good. Part of getting the message out. Okay, got that. Thank you, Elizabeth. Deanna.
Hello, I'm an ESOL teacher at Jackson Road Elementary School in Silver Spring, Maryland. And about 60% of our population is Hispanic, and so I was teaching them about women's history and sharing information with them. And the boys kind of got all like, well, why are we learning about girls? But then when I started teaching them about an astronaut named Ellen Ochoa, they saw the cultural relevance. And so as we begin or continue to explore and share the relevance of women and the role they play in history, we need to think about the relevancy of the different cultures and the contributions of the different cultures. Because it transcends and goes across to different genders.
Thank you very much, Deanna. Brianna.
Hi. As a Girl Scout of Central Maryland and student at the Institute of Notre Dame, which is right here in Baltimore, I wanted to know what the schools are doing to encourage leadership, political interests, and otherwise for young girls in Baltimore and in the state in general.
Okay. Thank you, Brianna. Nancy.
Yes, Mr. Secretary, Nancy Shamu. I work for the National Conference of State Historic Preservation Officers, and I'm here to pledge to you all that the State Historic Preservation Officers are rolling up their sleeves. Sorry, this is a little tight. I'll pledge to Stephanie and to Paul that we're ready to help you make this possible. Money is important, but in historic preservation, if you let money be your requirement, nothing would happen. So you've got our pledge to help in every state across the country.
We have a safe house in Baltimore County, and we do a Harriet Tubman presentation every year. We have for 6 years, combined with another gentleman who's done it for 12 years. We tried to get it into the schools somehow, that they would start a program, and we tried 3 schools. This past year, we have our first school in Baltimore County that is going to have a Harriet Tubman Day of Remembrance. And I think if every school had one of these, we could endorse women and get the word out.
Thank you, Shirley. Claire.
You asked for suggestions. I'm from National Goddard Space Flight Center, and I've been working with the Maryland Women's Heritage Center on their exhibit here on STEM careers. And I think that the effort that we did together in terms of highlighting STEM careers for women has been so positive, and it's definitely because of the Maryland Women's Heritage Center initiation of this project. But it's gotten out the word to so many young kids that STEM careers can be exciting. And even though I know that you're not focused on the STEM careers, if you or one of your assistants could take these 2 main products that we came out with, these posters are the set of posters that are already there, but little versions. In terms of suggested framework of how to send your out. So thank you for everything you're doing.
Thank you very much. Andra.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but to your extreme left, and I'm Anna Maria from docent here at the center, but just in terms of STEM, there were a group of young ladies, 25 of them came Saturday, and all that rain and mess we had here with our weather. But when they got to that section of the room where they saw all those young people listed up there pictorially, they're from Philadelphia. They're going back. They went back, and they were so impressed with looking at the presentations from Goddard and that piece back there that's interactive. So more interactive pieces available to the sites, regardless of the content, but in terms of identifying young people, really made a difference.
Thank you very much. Andra.
Yes. I'm the president of the Women's Industrial Exchange. We are one of those small organizations that Sally was talking about. We were founded in 1880 in Baltimore. We own a historic building, and our mission is still the same now as it was then, which is to provide a venue for women who are in need of an income who do crafts, to sell their crafts. And so we have a building, we have a gift shop, we have a restaurant that just reopened called the Women's Industrial Kitchen, all women run. Our big issue is that we do not have an executive director. We have a volunteer board, and we really are scraping by, month by month just to survive. And so our board actually is doing the work of an executive director. So we can get funding for renovations, that money does come through, but we have a very difficult time finding funding for staff. So grants to hire, or if the money is not there, I know how bad money is, internships or executive directors on loans.
So cross beyond just the physical facilities.
Yes,
Thank
yes.
you, Deborah. Al?
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I've edited my comment and questions and suggesting down to 1 minute, 5 seconds. I threw in 5 seconds because my daughter lives in Aurora. I'm a public historian who's worked in the far western Maryland counties for 35 years, and I also work with the Maryland Women's Heritage Center. In 2007, I was asked by the Business and Professional Women's Club of Cumberland, about 150 miles west of here, to make a presentation on historic women of Western Maryland for the March meeting. I thought, no problem. I only had a week, that there'd be a list of documentation, somewhere I'd find some information. Couldn't find a thing. I gave the program, but more importantly, since that time, and in cooperation with the nonprofit Western Maryland Regional Library, we've been able to develop a website with over 250 women from Western Maryland. It's been linked to colleges, universities, educational institutions across the country. We also did a similar one on African American history. And I'll be real honest with you, I have surveyed the literature from California. I haven't looked at Colorado because I'm sure it's great, all the way to New York, and I've not seen anything like it. It's something that could be replicated in any community with any nonprofit type of organization. 2 quick examples. Jane Gates, the great-great-grandmother of Dr. Henry Louis Skip Gates. His great-great-grandmother bought a house in Cumberland, Maryland, 1871, after she was freed. The first African-American woman to have a bank account in Western Maryland, and she is the largest property owner in the city of Cumberland for African-American families. Skip and I and his cousin are attempting to get that house on the National Register as we speak. We'll do it. Hannah Crescent, and this is fun, who in the Maryland boundary dispute with Pennsylvania during the 1730s was often seen on horseback in full battle array, leading a charge with saber, musket, and flugelhorn. Hannah even once denied the request of a candle to the Pennsylvanians so they could examine the leg wound of a member of their party, and instead cried out that she was not only glad that he had been wounded, but would have preferred the wound had been to his heart. Anyway, that's about the only comment I would have, and this may be a little bit out of your bailiwick. When I do all this research, I rely on the internet. And this relates to this. In conducting historical research, most recently on women's history and accessing resources, I have learned the value of broadband and modern telecommunications technology, something that many parts of rural America and the interior lack. I cannot overemphasize the importance of having this technology available to all our students. I know that's not directly under your bailiwick, but
I'm involved in all that stuff.
But out of voice of that, and have a copy of my comment. I'm driving 200 miles back, that's why I'm talking like this.
And I'm a part of the Maryland Women's Heritage Center. I'm actually one of the inductees over there. And I'm a community activist in Baltimore. And I'm asking, with all the professional work that they do on a high level for women, community organizers like me, I have a program. I'm going to give you a brochure. I have a student. I have a student government of young children between 6 and 13. They're all honor students. They're musicians. They're entrepreneurs in Baltimore. And we travel, and I teach African American history in the school system. I just did a project on Richmond, Virginia, that they're going to publish because I walk. And I just want to know, will y'all be working on funding? I'm restoring the historic Harlem Theater here in Baltimore, which is right across from a Civil Rights Military Park in Baltimore. I've worked with the Great Black and Whites with several historical projects in Baltimore, but real small, and the money, when the money is funded, I have a 501c3, we are very small, and I would like to know when they do the changing of the money, when it comes to the state level, is there going to be an avenue for?
I appreciate the comments, and let me just say, we are, hopefully this is a journey that is going to take some root here and that will continue for a long time to come. And so I want to make sure that your ideas, Al, it was a great presentation, and the thoughts you have on broadband. And we're all over the broadband. And we've done more for broadband in the last 3 years than any time all over rural America. But I want to make sure that we collect all your ideas. And so I'm designating the Deputy Director of the National Park Service, Peggy Odell, that you make sure that you get all the information into her, because she's going to be in charge for us in this blueprint that we're going to develop with all of you. And many of you have huge ideas. So let me just try to comment on some of the things that were said here and do a closing comment before I turn it over to Rachel Jacobson. First, many of you, Harriet, Nancy, others, raised the question of funding for staffing and for programs. And perhaps Nancy's comment is one which I would ask you all to take to heart. If we look at historic preservation and telling America's story, if we put up the money that is required, the reality of it is that everybody would be scared away and it's not going to happen. So we do historic preservation with very little amount of money. I just spoke to all of Nancy's state directors about 2 weeks ago, and I said to them, we send out what we fight for and finally get from Congress, and we did some 60 million plus this last year, and that goes out to the states. And so what I have communicated to the SHPOs and to others is that I want to make sure that as those monies are invested, that we are making sure that we're being inclusive of all of America's story. And we just heard Nancy's commitment from the state historic preservation officers that they will take this as something that they are going to implement at the state level. So that relates to how we take places, Senator, that maybe we need to upgrade on the register, include on the register. It includes making sure that as we move forward with the committee processes on designating national historic landmarks, that we have ideas from throughout the country, and not just Maryland. This is, for us, going to be a 50-state, United States of America kind of project. So your ideas on how we move forward with that are very much welcome. But I would just ask us, you look at what's happening with funding at the state levels, at the city levels, I don't expect, frankly, that we're going to see a lot more money for historic preservation. We may see some additional money. I have made the argument that I think it makes economic sense because historic preservation is job creation. We have a study that shows that through tourism and heritage preservation, we create over 8 million jobs in the United States of America. And those aren't jobs that you export, those are jobs that are here. And so I think there is a great opportunity for us to continue to make that argument for additional resources that come into historic preservation. And we will make those arguments. But having made that fight before and the fight that we will continue to make, it's also important for us not to let the money become an obstacle to doing what so many of you have done for so long on a voluntary basis, and that is to make sure that the history of women is pushed more to the forefront, so it's not just forgotten or becomes secondary in the minds of anybody. Second point, and I think the judge would speak probably even more ably to this than I can, but how we take what we have in terms of the information that we're developing and putting it into the classrooms so that whether it's the interactive program that we now have through Goddard Space Center here, or whether it's through the United States Department of Education, the State Department of Education, how do we make sure that this heritage and history that is so important to be told is in fact told to all of the young people of America as they're going through their classrooms? That's one of the challenges we have, and it's something that I hope can be part of our action plan. Dia, you raised the point on the importance of making sure that we look at the diverse communities. You know, for me, the Latino Heritage Initiative, which the President has started and which we're pushing across the country, is very similar to what we're trying to do with the women's heritage now. But through that effort, we're doing the same thing with historic landmarks, taking the units of the national park. There's some 25 or so units, and making sure that we go through those units and tell the story of Latino contributions as well as other aspects of those stories that have been told. But it's important to make sure that it's done. In some ways, I can relate to this personally because I remember when I was going through my own school in the southern part of Colorado, that I was taught that my family had come here on the Mayflower, that they had been a part of Plymouth Rock. And yet the reality of it was that my family came 400 years plus ago and founded the city of Holy Faith, the city of Santa Fe, New Mexico, from the south, from Taos, Mexico. And they were there 250 years before the Mexican-American War which concluded in 1848, and then all the Southwest became part of the United States, and yet that history was never told to us. And so a missing part of our own Latino history, but it's true with respect to women, African Americans, Japanese American, and so many other people. So we need to tell that story comprehensively. So here's the deal: we're going to take your ideas, some of which we've been gathering here in this historic meeting in Maryland, and we're going to transform them into an action plan that I will then implement with my 72,000 people that work for Rachel and Peggy. And we will try to figure out ways of bringing in others on the cabinet, including my partner, colleague, and friend Arnie Duncan at the Department of Education. And we will work with others to see what our next step will be. But this is not intended to be the end of Women's History Month, because to me it really is a call to action. And let me just finish. My staff does a wonderful job writing great speeches for me. And I have a written speech, but I was actually going to read it because it was so good. But I do want to just read a little piece of it because I think it'll tell you part of why I am here. So this is what they wrote. Before we begin, I have to tell a story about one of my predecessors as Secretary of the Interior, Robert McClelland, who served for 4 years under President Franklin Pierce in the 1850s. It so happens that a precocious young woman took a job at the U.S. Patent Office as a recording clerk. The Patent Office was then a part of the Interior Department, and remarkably, she was paid the same as her male counterparts, $1,400 a year. Unfortunately, Robert McClelland found out about her. He did not believe that women should be allowed to work in government offices. And so he promptly demoted her and cut her salary. This ultimately led to her position being eliminated. So I have to apologize to you all for my predecessor, who was blind to the many talents of this young woman, whose name was Clara Barton. I promise you that President Obama, Michelle Obama, and I will do better. I'll also note, this is just another, the Interior Department, it shows in my mind how our history, and it's so important to know it, is really marks towards a more perfect humanity and a more perfect union. So it's much later, almost 100 years later, that Rachel Carson came to work as a biologist in what was a predecessor agency to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And I dare say today that Rachel Carson's Silent Spring and her work on conservation have made her one of the conservation icons, not only of the United States, but really of the world. And we need to build off of her story and the stories that we see unfolding today to make sure that we do become a much more perfect union. So with that, I want to thank you, and I want to call on the Assistant Secretary for Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, Rachel Jacobson, to make some closing comments. Rachel, give her a round of applause.
Before you start, Rachel, I just want everybody to know that right behind you is our Rachel Carson, and also our Clara Barton. One of the things Clara Barton wrote this wonderful poem that said men didn't want women to be nurses during the war because they'd be scared, blood would scare them, and they'd run off and scream. And then she wrote later, "You were wrong."
Well, thank you very much. It's really a pleasure to be here and quite an honor. And I think what we've experienced today tells us that we're not done. We've come a long way, but every woman in this room knows, and some of the men in this room know as well, we're not done. And out of struggle comes opportunity, and that's continually the story of American women. And we have to keep repeating it, and we will not only honor the famous women like Clara Barton, like Rachel Carson, or when I was preparing to come over here, and there are so many women in American history, it's hard to know who to choose, but I urge you all to look up any woman in any part of the country and look at a story of a particular American woman. I landed on the story of Julia Morgan, who was an architect.
I did a piece on her. I did.
Oh, did you?
1904, she rebuilt. Yep.
That's right. She was an architect born in the 1870s and got a civil engineering degree from the University of California in 1890.
I told her story.
Continually rejected from architecture school, but she was determined to do it. And she became an architect. She came back to California, and her motto was, "No job is too small. No job is too small. I'm just going to do it. That's what I want to do." Well, turns out she ended up designing over 800 buildings, mostly in California, including the entirety of the Hearst estate. And how did she get that commission? Because William Randolph Hearst's mother, Phoebe Hearst, insisted that his son hire her. So out of struggle comes opportunity. But to the point made earlier, it is not just about the famous women who designed 800 buildings in California. It's about every woman. It's about mothers. It's about teachers. It's about nurses. It's about workers, factory workers. Women's role in this country is just, it's hard to tell it in one story. So thank you all very much. We at the Department of the Interior are committed to this project, and we'll try as hard as we can in the time we have left to see it through. So thank you.
We are so appreciative of your heart and the way you address these issues. This is for you, all about women's history, but also we have our historic Maryland women here to give gifts to the women who worked with us on your staff, who were so wonderful. Christina. And is Terry here?
Christina. Terry Johnson.
Terry Johnson. These are the three women we worked with, and so we want to recognize them too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed the show. It was a great day for women, a great way to honor them. This is Top of the Morning. Thanks for watching.